Hey everyone, I'm Arnell with AZ Animals, and this is AZ Ass. Today we're talking to Oliver, better known as the Wolf Guy on TikTok. He is the executive director of the Tahoe Wolf Center. Oliver, you're definitely what we would consider one of the Earth's MVPs. The work that you're doing is so necessary to break those old fears and help people truly appreciate these remarkable and often misunderstood animals. So I want to kind of go into your background. A few places you kind of mentioned growing up in a community where wolves were seen as dangerous and even hated. What turned that around for you to where you've been working with them for about 30 years now? It's such a big shift.
40. Well, so to be
Okay.
more specific, my family actually was a cattle ranching and feeding family in Colorado. So I
Mhm.
wouldn't say we were afraid of wolves. I would say that we weren't very touchy feely people with anything that's in the way of cattle, right? I
Okay.
mean so I mean to put that in perspective, ranch hands, like loose dogs on our ranch, the ranch hands would shoot the dogs, right? I mean, that's just sort of an unfortunate typical behavior is, ranchers and cattle people kind of kill the stuff that's in their way. My mom was more of an animal lover and a bleeding heart. And when I was 4, she read me a book. It's out of print now, but I always buy them when I can find them because I like to give them to kids when they come visit and learn about wolves. Called A Wolf of My Own. And it's about a little girl who gets a striped box with holes for her birthday. And she imagines it's a wolf. It's a puppy, but it's a wolfy looking puppy. And they have these cute wolfy adventures. I was a very literal kid. I am. And I was like, no, wolf, not puppy, wolf. And it just set me on this path. I mean, I realized I was also pragmatic. When you grow up in that kind of an environment, smart people, but hard work. My father's an attorney, so it was my granddad who was the rancher, and I understood that this wasn't like one of those things that was going to happen overnight, and I just became fascinated with the species. I dove deep into it early. I was one of those kids that taught himself stuff, and I spent a lot of time in the mountains, and there was sort of this transformational event that occurred that kind of got me. I think it was the big jump that moved me forward. So I would do a lot of cross country skiing and stuff alone. I was like maybe 8 or 9 years old. I was cross country skiing alone in the mountains, and I came across a fox caught in a trap. And I loved foxes also. Like anything with pointy teeth and pointy noses, I really loved. And this was super traumatic for me because you can't legally release a trapped animal. It's a violation of state and even some federal laws.
Wow.
And so we
Okay.
called the game warden, and the game warden's like, all I can do is shoot it. And he shot it right in front of me. And it just it just did something to me. And I wrote this letter to the editors of the Denver Post and the Rocky Mountain News that was very, very poignant. I kind of had a knack for writing even as a little kid. And I wanted trapping to stop in Colorado. And at that time in the 70s, trapping was kind of big in Colorado, and it created an uproar. I like to say I've been living with death threats ever since that letter. Um, yeah, I literally people were throwing bags of feces at my home because they were so offended by this 8-year old saying stop trapping. But what happened was a very famous animal activist named Cleveland Amory, who I think was maybe one of the founders of the Humane Society of the United States, and who had written a book called Animals Nobody Loves. He was very well known at the time, and he was coming to Denver to the Natural History Museum, which is a pretty big museum in Colorado, to present a book about the foxes of Hokkaido. And somebody alerted him to my letter. He invited me to come to the event, and he interviewed me on stage in front of, I don't know how many people, but it seemed like a lot to me at the time. And it just put me on the radar in a very interesting way. And what I discovered was that there were, and I say now that my mom was driving me around to meet my future self because I found out that there were these old guys living in the woods in Colorado who had taken it upon themselves to preserve the genetics of the Rocky Mountain wolves that had been extirpated. And so I convinced my poor mom to drive me into these far flung places to meet weird old dudes who had wolves. And I spent a lot of time sort of learning about wolves from people that were doing it. And that sort of formed my initial sensibilities about how to appropriately care for quasi wild or fully wild animals in captivity. I picked up a lot of poop, really a lot of poop. I probably have picked up more wolf poop than anyone in the history of anyone at this point. I pick up poop every day. So that was the beginning of it. I volunteered at the Denver Zoo. I studied the wolves there. I entered into a conservation biology program with a focus on carnivore behavior and managed to get myself thrown out of the program for objecting to the reintroduction of the wolves into Yellowstone. That's a very technical argument, but in essence, in order to get the wolves back in the park, they had to maneuver to weaken the Endangered Species Act with some very special new additions. I objected to those additions because I felt like the damage it would do to accelerate the recovery was greater than just waiting for the recovery to happen naturally, as wolves were already migrating back into Montana from Canada and were fully protected. And my professor, who's a friend of mine, said, "Hey, we have a real problem here. You're on the radar of everybody who could ever hire you, and they don't like you. They think you're too much of a loudmouth. You're putting yourself out there in a bad way, and there's no point for you to be in my program because there will be no job at the end." And that was probably fortuitous, because otherwise I probably would have ended up working for a state agency as a biologist. Instead, I became an entrepreneur, which gave me the opportunity to have resources that most state biologists don't have, and put me in a position to retire relatively early, and open my own nonprofit that I largely fund myself. But essentially, since I was 17, I moved out early, and I got my first wolf dog when I was like 17. So I've had these animals consistently ever since. And with that, let's step out into the habitat and we'll keep talking. I'm probably going to have somebody interfere with me. Right
Yeah,
now, I'm on my deck. So it's funny, most people have a deck to keep their dogs in. My deck is secured to keep the animals out, because I can't have a picnic on my picnic table here without these guys mauling me and stealing my lunch.
yeah, I have to ask about Icnic. I saw that video.
Oh yeah, well, Icnic is in the back here somewhere. We'll go find him in a second here.
Okay.
And let's see, Icnic, Noonie. Our habitat is quite large, so we have a bisected habitat. I have some animals that don't get along. The girls are spicy with each other. So here's my Malamute Nepenthe, my dog. And then this is my old lady. This is a Kutak, and she's 14. She's my old lady, still very, very spicy. And then over here on the other side of my electrified separation, we've got Sun and Moon. Their real names are Takik is the black one, that means moon, and Sikanik is the light one, that means sun. I call them Sunny and Moony. And Sunny wants to kill a Kutak, and Mooney wants to kill Nepenthe. So we keep them apart for that reason. The girls are always trickier in captivity, but they're 3 days apart, but from different parentage. But we call them sisters because, for all intents and purposes, they're sisters.
They're
And
beautiful.
thank you. Yeah. So then this is the larger part of the habitat. We've got a pond for them. It's about 12,000 gallons, which they keep destroying every year. I have to rebuild it. They tear up the liner, and then you can kind of just get a scan here. And I'm going to, hopefully this will go okay for us. I'm going to turn on, when I move around the habitat, I sometimes lose my Wi-Fi, and then it drops out. So I'm going to try to turn you off of my Wi-Fi and just be on at work. There we go. It took a sec to switch over, but now we should have good service the whole way. Let's go see if I could find Icnic and Icnic and Mooney for you. The other day, I found out they had a hole that's so big that at least 3 and maybe 4 wolves can go down in it, completely into it at the same time, and I can't even see them, and I can't get to the back of it. It's too big. So they could be in the hole, but we'll do a little exploring here. I'm going to flip the camera around so you can see Let's see how. Here we go. All right. This will give you a tour. Nepenthe, where's Noonie and Icknick? So the habitat's big enough that one of the reasons I use tracking collars. Oh, here's Noonie. They blend so well I can literally step on them. So this is Noonariak or Noonie. Noonie's a puppy, a very large puppy. He just turned a year in April. Didn't you? He's my
Oh my goodness.
Noonie. Yeah. Most of my animals are planned acquisitions from other people that do the work I do. Don't steal
Mhm.
my coffee. But Noonie was hi. Got to get the greeting. He's very toothy. He's already chipped one of my teeth. Um, and so just so you get a size perspective here, Nepenthe weighs 80 pounds. So she's like the size of a good sized female German Shepherd. And when she's next to him, she looks like a Shiba Inu.
Yeah.
Like, like we actually call her small cute because of the comparison.
Look at that coat. That's insane.
I know he's got a spectacular coat. And he is the most unusual colored animal I've had. I've never had an animal that had all of these sort of tawny tones. And it was also interesting. He has a very mild. Here's a word for your audience: heterochromia, which means that his eyes are two slightly different colors. It's hard to
Okay.
see, but you could see that one of them is slightly. Nepenthe, move! Nepenthe. She's she's in his face there. Noonie, here. You see one of them's a little bit yellower than the other. Very
Yeah.
slight. And that's a normal in the population that he comes from Canada. That's a normal genetic drift. It's just a unique population level thing. So he's in his, I call that a cool bowl. They dig out these little bowls down to sort of the moist soil to stay cool when it's hot. It's in the mid 70s here today, which is pretty warm. And let's see if we can find Icknick for you.
Yeah, it sounds like every day kind of brings its own like challenges and moments of connection. Like from the different feedings to enrichment, what would you say are the main things that go into caring for a pack?
Um, well, I mean, to do a good job, right? There's a lot of people that have inmates, right, where the animals are confined and their lives are boring and their habitats are inappropriate. That isn't us. Animal husbandry is my number one priority. It's my major
Hmm.
focus. It dictates everything about my life. I mean, where I live, how I live. You know, we have over $200,000 invested just in fencing up here. We get
Mm.
700 inches of snow some winters, which is an insane amount of snow. So we have to use ornamental iron because game fencing or chain link will just get pulled down when the snow compacts. So we have you can see how the fencing works here. And then, of course, it's ground wired all the way around so they don't dig out. And this is the great big hole here. It's insane how deep this hole goes. Icknick, are you down there?
Whoa.
Icknick. And they have to get some treats. I think he's probably in there. But if I shake a bag of treats, which we can do, here comes Noonie. We got some action here. Here comes Noonie. Noonie, will you get your brother out of the hole? Like I usually can go down in a den, but I'm a little scared of this one because it goes down at kind of a steep angle, and I can't see the back of it with the camera, and I'm afraid if
Hmm.
I crawl into it, I won't be able to get out of it.
Yeah, that would be pretty terrifying. I probably wouldn't do that either.
Yeah, I see those videos of the people doing that cave stuff, and I'm like, and I'm a pretty fearless guy. Like there's very few things that
I mean, you do have wolves.
yeah. Oh, here she goes. Watch. Just check this out. Camera back around here. Here we go. Just she can totally. And the thing is, it's so big, they can go in there and turn around. So like there's some cavern in there,
Do you
but
know who started that?
She's gonna come out face first. Nepenthe, come on, come on. Like she's just gone. I mean, when I go down there, I can't even see her body. It goes around the corner and down like a corkscrew.
I wonder how
Nepenthe,
long it took for them to construct that, to dig
see,
that
here
out.
she comes. It's amazing how fast they can construct it. Like if I step back here, you could see the enormous pile of fine earth. And I mean, it's just, they can dig a hole like that in like a day or two. It's just crazy. And Akutak actually is my chief architect as the sort of the matriarch. She has the strongest denning instinct. And so she usually does. So wolves don't live in dens year round. Is Ziknik down there? Nepente, is Ziknik way down there? He probably is, huh? Um, so they typically den only right before they give birth. That's the only time when they're in the den. Typically, like wolves will go in a hole to avoid the heat or something, but like they don't typically sleep in a den. Go get him. Go get him for me. Nick, Nick. So it's only the mother wolf and the pups, and maybe another female that typically spend any time in the den caring for the pups, and that's only for usually like the first 6 weeks or so of their lives. And then they move them to what they call a rendezvous site, which is typically an above ground location that may be more convenient for hunting or whatever. Dens are always built sort of into hillsides with water nearby, usually with a pretty good vantage point. And the usually the breeding female makes the selection of where the den is located and does the principal excavation work, and then they tend to return to the same den year after year and improve it. And some of those den sites over many generations can be really extensive. The, there's a book I love, which I highly recommend, called Among Wolves by Dr. Gordon Haber. And Dr. Haber documented a generational den site in the East River, the Taklot River in Alaska's Denali National Park, that extended, and it had a warren of tunnels that extended for several acres, which, to put in perspective, is as big as this whole habitat, just tunnels. I mean, and that he said that had been occupied probably either sporadically or continuously by the same lineage for hundreds of years before those wolves were all trapped and killed by the same guy. Oh, here's Nick. Nick's so stealthy. Oh my gosh. Like, it's amazing how I can look for these guys. Nick. Here's your favorite. So Nick is 6 years old now. Where are you? What are you doing? I just saw his ears. I just saw his ears. Where are you? It's remarkable. Oh, here he is. Here he is. Nick. He's standing at they know where the food is. Nick, come here. Come on. Oh, here's my handsome boy. This animal here is, in 40 years, I've never had an animal with a nicer disposition. I mean, when I say he's nice, there's just something overwhelmingly gentle and sweet about this animal. And that's, see here. So, the puppy's annoying, and he'll just kind of tell him, I'm your boss a little bit. But the thing is, the true alpha wolves are really benevolent. They're not overly aggressive. Like, you'll see, it's only when the puppy bothers him that he gives him any indication that he's not liking it. But yeah, Nick is just a one of a kind, super. I mean, and he's huge. He's 150 pounds, which puts him at the largest edge of wolves. They're very vocal. Come here. Come on. Let's go hang out. Come on. What's amazing
This is like the coolest thing ever.
What's that?
This is like the coolest thing ever.
Oh, I consider myself very fortunate both to live with these animals, but also to get to share them with others, right? My whole mission is to help people understand wolves for what they are. And that means the truth, right? So, I mean, they are professional killers of the things they need to eat. And they're very good at that. They're terrible pets. I get phone calls every week from people who got wolf dogs and discovered that it's not like having an Alaskan Malamute that's just a little bit edgier. It's a completely different kind of a thing that requires a completely different level of commitment and care. And for me, these animals are essentially wild animals socialized to me and my wife. Right? They're not domesticated. And you
Hmm.
can sort of see you still have all the wolf behaviors. And one of the things I love the most is how Icknick is so gentle to our old lady. He just loves her more than anything, and he knows she's old. And he's just like, he'll never step on her. Like, the puppy's gonna probably put his big foot on her, and she's gonna show him teeth. But Icknick is super careful. Like, he just, and I have videos where you would never with a domestic dog give, you know, a 10 or a 12-day old puppy and let the male have access to the puppy. That you'd be risking the puppy dying. But Icknick will care for the little tiny puppies. Just, it's amazing. He loves them so much. He's so careful. He's so protective. His whole disposition changes when we have puppies on the property and unfamiliar people approach. He's just, then he becomes just the senior guardian.
Yeah, and also just to get into, people's fears and often what's displayed in the media and sometimes even folklore, what would you say are like the biggest myths about wolves and, the work that you're doing to kind of dispel some of those myths?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I mean, the myths are like every myth. There is some truth to the myth. And the truth
Right.
is that in the Middle Ages, when we'd engage in these crazy field warfare kind of activities, and the dead would be lying all in the field, wolves will eat free meat. And at that point, humans killing humans is free meat. And so you'd have wolves that were consuming the dead. And of course, rabies was also prevalent because there was no way to prevent it. And so there were
Hmm.
times when, particularly in Europe in the Middle Ages, and also when there were more wolves in India, wolves would attack and occasionally kill people. And that mythology carried over. And then what happened is, as we began to be um, agrarian and had livestock, all of a sudden you had the possibility that wolves would steal your livestock because all of a
Hmm.
sudden that livestock was where the wolves were. And so that created sort of this enmity. But what's fascinating about this is that it's probably because of wolves or some very early wolf dog that modern humans rose to prominence over Neanderthals in Europe. There's a fantastic book by Dr. Pat Shipman called The Invaders. And it talks about when modern Homo sapiens came to Europe, and there's this dramatic evolutionary example where all of a sudden we, Homo sapiens, started to have enormous amounts of bone associated with our habitation to the point where we were using it to construct domiciles, and those bones show evidence of canid chewing that appears integrated into the culture. And the supposition, and I believe it to be a really plausible hypothesis, is that the association with these, whether they were just wolves or whether they were some early dog prototype, gave Homo sapiens an enormous advantage in terms of hunting and protection. And it was that additional push that was able to overcome what appear to have been obvious physical advantages that Neanderthals possessed over Homo sapiens in terms of adaptation to a northern climate. It's a
Mm.
fascinating hypothesis, but it also sort of aligns with sort of the timeline, the historical timeline of the evolution of wolves into dogs. So it's very fascinating. So it's crazy that on the one hand, wolves gave us dogs and maybe pushed us over the edge to survival and thrival. And yet they're also perhaps the most vilified and hated of all of our predatory competitors. But the reality, of course, is that wolves are very shy of people. Modern wolves will do just about anything they can to avoid people. It's only when they've been habituated to people through constant benevolent observation, like in Yellowstone, where the wolves are unfortunately really habituated to people. They're so used to people, they'll walk between parked cars because they're just under continual observation all day, every day, year around by wolf watchers. it bothers me because those same wolves, the park isn't endless, and when those wolves step over the boundary of the park, they can be shot. Montana, Idaho, Wyoming are all very liberal in their policies to kill wolves. And it's really
Mm-hmm.
unsporting when wolves are completely unafraid and non-sensitive. They're desensitized to people to shoot those wolves because they're so used to being under observation, and there's no way they can tell a malevolent from a benevolent person, and so it just makes them easy pickings. So I won't go to Yellowstone. Contribute to the habituation of the wolves there in the park, and I know their behavior is aberrant because Icknick is more afraid of unfamiliar people than many of the wolves in the park, even though he's never had a bad second with a human. And so it just, it bothers me a lot that we have that dichotomy. And I wish that people, particularly the people that supposedly love wolves the most, are the ones in the park, and yet they're the ones that are contributing to making those particular wolves, the most visible wolves on Earth, especially vulnerable to killing. Like, I believe that until Montana and Wyoming and Idaho are forced to have a buffer zone that would completely protect the wolves in the park at a minimum, that people should boycott the park. I feel like we should cut off that enormous flow of revenue to those states until they become conservationists, at least with respect to animals that we've habituated. Right. And then
Mm-hmm.
to be clear, I'm opposed to wolf hunting, period. Exclamation
Yeah.
point, full stop. Um, Predation on livestock can be ameliorated down to near zero through non-lethal coexistence strategies that are much more effective than simply killing wolves. You can't kill your way out of a wildlife problem until you extirpate the species. Right? You kill an animal, another animal moves into the habitat. Now you got to kill that animal. We are the only ones that can change our behavior to give a different outcome. And we should know by now, after hundreds of years of killing predators, that there are better ways, and we've scientifically documented it. And so part of what I do is I try to teach people about that. Uh, I should be uniquely credible with my background, but instead I'm uniquely hated because the ranchers, if you've ever been to a federal hearing, you will observe that many of the anti-wolf public, the ranching and the hunting community, um, tend to try to diminish the credibility of the wolf people because they say, we'll put wolves in New York City, see how you like it, right? You're a yuppie, you're some urban person, you've never dealt with wolves, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't have a right to have an opinion on this topic. And then there's me, right? And I'm a guy who's lived with wolves for 40 years. I mean, this is me, right? Sitting here in the dirt with wolves. And I grew up with, and these ranchers, to my family scale, hi, Nepente, got to get my little licks in here. The scale of our operation, like these guys in California and Montana and Wyoming, for the most part, they may have, 300 to maybe 2,000 head on their operation. And our family at its peak had 54,000 between our feed yards and our ranching. And so the scale is so vastly different that to me, those guys are more hobbyists than, operators. And so they hate me the most. I was nearly beaten to death in 2012 in Arizona after I testified on behalf of Mexican wolves. A couple of cowboys surrounded me and started beating me up in the parking lot.
This is this is terrible. For for what? For standing up for them?
Yeah, it was also the best insult I think I ever had before the guy knocked me out. I talked about the fact that in that environment, cattle are an invasive species, and they're an inappropriate species in especially sensitive, arid national forests. The damage they do is unrecoverable, and we have tons of evidence of this. And I said as much at this hearing. And these five cowboys, one of whom was just gigantic. He was for reference, I'm 5'11", I weigh about 165. I'm a fit guy, but I'm not a very, I'm a little bigger than an average guy, but I'm not a huge guy. And this guy was a huge guy. He was like 6'5", 6'6", probably almost 300 pounds. And they got around me, and he pokes me in the chest, and he says, "Why do you hate cows so much?" I said, "I don't hate cows. I hate what cows do to the environment when they're in places they shouldn't be." And he
Mm-hmm.
just kept provoking me and getting close and giving me little pushes. And I looked at him and I said, "What, you want to have a big fight right here?" And he looks at me just with like just totally dismissively, and he goes, "It wouldn't be a big fight." And then he punched me and I went
Oh
down.
my
It
gosh.
was like being hit with a club. And then the only reason I'm here, honestly, is because another advocate saw, and he had bear spray, and he comes running up and he says, "I got bear spray. You guys stop." And they picked me up, and um, but yeah, so their response to me is violence because they can't diminish my credibility.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke with someone else who works with who works with sharks. And so he's kind of like in the similar position where, there's all these fears around sharks, what they do. And he actually told me something. I had to look it up after the interview. But livestock has way more deaths attached to it than shark attacks. I couldn't have told you that. They
Oh
even
gosh,
kill you in
cows
the
are one of
hall.
the most dangerous animals in the world.
Yeah.
Cows will kill you. I mean, they'll just step on you and you die. And bulls are super dangerous. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, cattle are so big that, I mean, it's not uncommon if you're on foot inside like a pen, that you just get crushed up against the fence if they get spooked. And 1,200 pounds smashing into a frail human body against a fence can just
Mm-hmm.
kill you. Yeah, they're super. And then, of course, car accidents, because, most people don't know that when you see a sign, this is in the Western states in particular, but when you see a sign on the side of the road that has a cow on the sign, it's just a cow, right? And do you know what I'm talking about? Have you ever seen one of those signs?
No, I recently moved to like the North Dakota area, so I've never.
You'll see them. You drive on the highway and you'll see a sign. It's just a yellow sign with a big black cow, right? It's
Mhm.
obviously a cow. It's not a deer. It's not an elk. And what that sign is really saying, or it may even have a little tag beneath that says open range. Open range laws are fascinating because what open range means is that if you have private property in open range and you don't want cattle on your land, you have to fence them out at your expense. And that also means that if you hit a cow or a steer or a calf while you're driving down a public highway in open range, technically you're liable to the rancher for the cost. It's one egregious example of how cowboys wrote the laws in the West for their
Mm.
benefit. And people tend to think that cowboys are, kind of like not that bright, redneck kind of. That is not the case. At least not. Yeah, there are plenty of those guys. Don't get me wrong, plenty of those guys. But the guys like my grandfather were running the show politically behind the scenes. They had and still have massive influence at the highest levels of government. That's why we're killing wolves for killing cattle, is because those guys have influence. I mean, to give you an example, growing up, once a week, because I did everything with my grandpa. My grandpa was just my hero. And now in retrospect, I understand things that as a small child I just thought were cool, but I didn't really understand what was happening. But my granddad and his brother, with the company was called WB Livestock, Wiseman Brothers Livestock, and I think every Tuesday or Wednesday we would go to downtown Denver, drive all the way back to Denver, and go up to this great big skyscraper, which as a kid you're like, oh, the elevator and all the buttons, right? And go to this very fancy club. And I now know that that club was called the Petroleum Club, and that is where the oilmen and the lawyers and the politicians and the ranchers who ran the show met to make the rules. And they were writing laws that benefited those industries, and then they were buying the politicians to make sure the laws they wanted to go in place went in place. And those laws are still in place today, most of them. That's why we have open range laws. That's why public lands grazing is still only $1.35 a month for cow calf pair when it's $17 a month on private land, right? That's why we subsidize ranchers and extractive industries like timber and oil, is because of those meetings with people like my granddad, who said, this is what I need, and I have the money to buy you to make sure that goes in place. And I mean, we were having meetings with, the mayor of Denver, the governor. I didn't know who these guys were at the time, but now I look back and I remember the names. Here's my ICNIC.
Oh my goodness.
And you'll notice that I came out here and then everybody else is sitting with me. Wolves tend to spend their time all together. And if I go out into the habitat, as long as I'm not sitting in direct sun on a hot day, before long, everybody will come and settle with me.
So is this something where others are able to come and see, or do you kind of keep it like a private thing, or how does the
So,
sanctuary work?
so I don't technically call myself a sanctuary because my
Mhm.
focus is education, science, and advocacy, not rescue.
Okay,
So I'm more of like an educational facility.
okay,
Because of where I'm located now, which is on private property and the way the zoning is, I'm not like a public attraction. Like you can't come and buy a ticket and hang out here. I do
mm,
allow like on sort of a one by one. People contact me and like they want to come see. They have to sign a pretty serious waiver to protect me. My lawyers and my nonprofit charter require that they acknowledge. It's basically like if you're going to go on a horseback tour and you're signing away, no matter what happens, it's my fault. It's sort of like
okay,
that, just to protect me. But so I have occasional visitors. I will also do like programs where people are outside the fence, right? Like
mm,
there's a whole military base that comes up every year, and 100 people will sit out in the forest on the other side of the fence, and I'll give a talk, and the animals, of course, are curious, so they can see them right there. But I have a goal. There's a piece of land up here. I'm in Tahoe, and there's a piece of land that's currently a golf course, and that golf course is it's got very tricky zoning. And that zoning here, I'm going to flip the camera for you. That zoning is really restrictive. Like if it weren't restrictive, they would build condos and it'd be $100 million parcel. But they can't build hardly anything. And so it's been on and off the market for about $6 million. And I'm working with my board of supervisors, and there's something up here called TRPA, which governs land use because we're in this special zone. And if they give me the green light, what I want to do is buy that golf course, rewild it, which will do incredible environmental good because golf courses use 500,000 gallons of water a day in the summer, and they put about 7,000 gallons of herbicide into the groundwater every year. And so I want to buy it, have it professionally rewilded, and then have the pretty much the finest wolf science center in the world, modeled after the International Wolf Center in Ely, Minnesota. And so that facility would be fully open to the public from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., 365 pretty much. They'd have an ambassador pack of wolves that could be observed in an auditorium with be a big habitat, even bigger than mine now, and then cameras everywhere, so you'd be able to watch, just be comfortable in a climate-controlled environment and really learn about wolves being wolves. And we'd be in a habitat that large. We'd also be able to do a lot of science. And so that's really the goal for my nonprofit. And yeah, and then the thing is that right now most wolf centers only get the faithful. They're far away. They're hard to get to. They're not convenient. This would be on the main route. My dog is throwing sand right in my face while she makes her cool bowl. Aren't you? Look at those feet. And it would be the most accessible wolf center on earth. It would literally be in the path of travel, literally turn right, see wolves for 25 million people a year.
mm.
And so that would give
Yeah,
us a
and
really a really good chance to make the kind of impact that I strive to make, which is get people to see these animals, learn the truth, and demand that they're allowed to recover where they can recover.
Yeah, through working with wolves, has there been any like story or thing that's happened, just to kind of bring it all together, that has really stuck with you over the course of 40 years?
So, well, a couple things. And actually, I'm about to give two TEDx talks this fall. One in near Houston and one near Orlando. I'm scheduled. Two different talks, but on the same topic. And the topic is about alpha wolves and this whole alpha masculinity concept that's being, particularly by guys like Jocko Willink and Sneeko and Andrew Tate and even Joe Rogan a little bit, which is, brutal, ruthless competitors, never apologize,
Mm-hmm.
top dog, in a dog eat dog world. And that is based on a lie. The whole alpha wolf concept was based upon observations of captive wolves in the 40s and later in the 60s that were completely wrong. And we know that in the wild, alpha wolves are much more like Ichnik. They're benevolent caretakers. They understand
Mm-hmm.
that the strength of the family determines their survivability as individuals. Wolves are incredibly family oriented. They care for their young as well or better than humans care for their young. Their families are just like ours. Packs are not made of unrelated individuals. Every wolf pack forms when a boy wolf and a girl wolf like each other, find a place that is unoccupied by other wolves, and they have puppies, and that's a pack. And so I don't even like to use the term pack. I always use the term family group because that's
Mm-hmm.
really what they are. It's dogs form packs, loosely associated, come together, spread apart, association by convenience. Wolves are association by blood. And the violence of wolf on wolf conflict is not within the same family typically, uh, only in very rare occasions, but rather wolf family versus wolf family over territorial boundaries for better hunting, just like humans, just like humans. So I would say that the most important things are the alpha wolf myth is not true, that wolves bear more similarities to us than potentially any other mammalian species on Earth. They're so much like us. That's why dogs became our family, is because they are so much like us socially and culturally. And then, the other thing that is also featured in my talk is, and how I really learned this lesson personally is that, early in my life working with wolves, I had a more inaccurate view of what it meant to be the boss. And I wasn't an abusive boss, but I was a sterner boss. And at one point, I did something. You can read about this actually. If you, I'll send you a link so it's easy for you to find. But I made a mistake, and I had a wolf attack me, and he nearly killed me. I was very badly hurt. And the things I learned were, don't do that. How really strong they are. I mean, it's amazing how people think that they can tackle a wild animal, and I'm just telling you, I was in the best shape I've ever been in as a person, and I was a pro athlete. I was wearing enough clothes for 20 below all day, so I was very well protected. And he broke one of my arms in 37 places. They almost amputated my arm. And if he did that through all that kind of clothes, the only reason I'm even here is because I had a girlfriend with me who was a professional horsewoman, and she was absolutely fearless, and she saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, but again, I like to emphasize that happened because he thought. So what happened was we were taking photos deep in the woods. I had that animal whose name was Jake on a leash because we were done. His mate Jessa, who I'd had her whole life, was being difficult. She was like playing tag with me and racing around and not let me get her. And I was afraid she was going to get down to this little mountain highway in the dark and get run over. And I was cold and we were tired and I was getting frustrated. And when she ran by me, I just sort of pounced on her, like just grabbed her. And she squeaked like, "Beep." And Jake thought I was attacking her. And he was like, no, no. And he just straight away attacked me. And I know now that I have a whole leadership framework that I call Benevolent Alpha, where I work with like executives to help them become better leaders of teams and companies. And in
Mm.
my Benevolent Alpha framework, you, in a situation like that, you mirror the behavior of the group. And in this case, she was being playful. And instead of getting frustrated and being aggressive, what I should have done was reciprocated the play and moved away from the dangerous situation and got her to follow me and play with me. And I could have maintained control of the situation in a much gentler, more benevolent, more altruistic way. And I would not have created the tension that resulted in the other wolf deciding to attack me. And so that brought that home in a very personal way, but it also gave me a very deep understanding of the capabilities of wolves and also how to interact with them in ways that keep me safe.
Yeah, I didn't even know. So you have like a whole kind of like business model too, where you go and speak to people about how to run things in a more sustainable way. That's a really interesting way to put it, to kind of like mimic their energy.
Well, if people want to mimic wolves, which are great leadership models, then let's mimic the real leadership model, not the one that's invented by media personalities for personal gain. And the
Mm.
reality is that the most sustainable organizations in the world, whether they know it or not, are engaged in benevolent alpha leadership. It's that people within their companies and their groups and their teams feel very safe and secure in those teams. They have freedom to make mistakes and the opportunity to learn
Mhm.
from mistakes. That the best leaders are service centered, not dominance centered. That the objective of any leader is to be replaceable by making everyone on their team capable of replacing them through mentorship and support. And there's a lot of research now coming out, including at Google and other companies, that show that that kind of leadership builds the most diverse, sustainable, high performance teams in the world. And it also results in less churn, less burnout, more collaboration at every level in your organization. And so, yeah, I have this whole wolf inspired leadership model. I'm also working on a book about it called Defanging Alpha: Rethinking Leadership Through Nature's Lens.
Okay.
And I also have another book that's already out called A Wolf Lover's Guide to Raising Dogs.
Okay. Where can we get that shirt too? Is another.
Oh, so I thought you might ask. Okay, so there's a story behind the shirt, and yes, you can get it at oliverthewolfguy.com or at
Okay.
tahowolfcenter.org. Those are my two online locations for merch. And I had a video of Icnic on TikTok that went super viral. It got like 21 million views, and it was when I was first on TikTok, and I kept getting these comments: "If not friend, why friend shaped?" And at first I
Mm-hmm.
thought this must be like a translation thing from Chinese. But then I was like, started looking at the names and I was like, no, that's not that. So I Googled it and I found out that National Geographic had an article about grizzly bears called If Not Friend, Why Friend Shaped, with the implication being, why do they look so cute if they're going to kill you?
Mm-hmm.
And I co-opted the meme. I made Icknick on a shirt. And so I have shirts and tanks and hoodies and mugs with Icknick and If Not Friend, Why Friend Shaped. And then the back has the logo of the nonprofit.
That's awesome.
And
That's
Icknick
super
is very
cool.
much friend shaped. Icknick is the most the most friend shaped wolf I've ever had. He's just, I cannot tell. I mean, it's hard to describe because he's so timid with strangers that they never really get to interact with him like this.
Mm.
But he's this gentle giant. And he is really the perfect alpha wolf. Like, this is really what alpha wolves are like.
And
And
I
all
love
the other
like the
wolves
way that
love him.
I love the way that you put the real leadership advice straight from the wild. I do want to say thank you so much for giving a window into life, into your pack, and everything that you do to protect, or not your pack, your family.
Thank you.
So just to kind of reframe how we see wolves. This has been AZ Ass interviewing again one of the Earth's MVPs, Oliver the Wolf Guy, who's helping the world trade fear for fascination when it comes to these extraordinary creatures. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure sharing my family with you today.